Welcome to the Viewsroom with Pfif and AWAC. I'm your host, Kat White, aka AWAC, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Pfiffer, also known as Pfif, or
Hello,
as you'll
folks.
often hear me call him, Pfif Daddy.
Howdy.
This is our second episode, and we're going to pick up where we left off in episode 1 with a short chat about wokeness, political correctness, and a peek into the newsroom culture, at least when Pfif and I worked in one. Before we even start, is there a newsroom anymore, like for newspapers, or is everyone remote now, do you think?
Everybody's working out of their homes. For most of the Gannett newspapers, there is no newsroom.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, we were gonna start talking out with wokeness, and I'm sorry that I'm doing this now, Pike, but I think it's a perfect time to just chat about a little bit more about why we're doing this podcast and where the idea came from.
Sure.
And for when we worked in the newsroom, I know it was like, I think maybe twice a month that there was a core group of us in the newsroom that would go to lunch on payday, I think it was. And we just have these great conversations. It was you, me, and Jeffrey Aaron, who was our business reporter, as well as everything else. I mean, I guess we had titles, but we pretty much did whatever needed to get done. And then, there'd also be other reporters, interns that had come in, photographers, editors, everybody, depending on what they had going on that day that we happened to be going to lunch and where we were going, if they liked it. But we just had the best conversations.
Yep.
And then even after we, left the Star-Gazette, we continued to do that. And there's still a group, I believe, of Star-Gazetters that are in the area that get together once in a while for breakfast or lunch.
You're correct.
And it was just, for me, the newsroom was it was a very casual place, even though it was very professional and businesslike, but it really lent us the opportunity to become family, become friends, to get close. Yep. And to have those kinds of conversations that normally really take a long time to develop.
And I think the big part of that is you got to think about reporters. We're curious, we're nosy, we're not afraid to ask hard questions. We want the truth. You don't want to have to read between the lines. So you get a bunch of reporters together, they start talking and asking questions and telling the truth and not offended by questions someone asks you. You get the straight dope. And I still do that to this day. And my wife is always elbowing me, Jim, you become a reporter, stop asking all these questions to people. But when you get a bunch of people together who ask questions and are nosy, it makes for great conversations, very frank information and truthful information.
Absolutely.
Too much. Yeah, you don't see that too much today.
No, and it's hard to get different perspectives because everyone is so afraid to share theirs. They're afraid they're gonna offend someone, or they're gonna get a whole bunch of blowback for just asking a question on something. And it's taken me a long time and a lot of different experiences to kind of be able to see both sides of that picture. And I think we've had that conversation too, where you ask questions not to offend people, not to hurt anyone's feelings, but just to gain knowledge and to learn more. Yep. But there are some cultural things that I think sometimes people get offended, like they don't want to have to explain it. They want you to go and learn and get educated, and they shouldn't have to be your teacher. Yep. And I get that, in life, we all want to just live our lives. And especially if you have something that's different, that is of curiosity to others, you may get asked a question, numerous times, like, where'd your name come from? Or can I touch your hair? Why do you do your hair like that? Or, just why do you eat that type of food? Instead of what we think of as normal. And after a while, it can get annoying, I guess. I've always just been excited when someone's been interested in something of that I do, or, you know, or the way that I am, it kind of gives me an opportunity to explain and talk probably. In addition to being very curious, I am a chatty Cathy, so.
Well, and although you're asking the question of the person for the first time about, geez, how do you do your hair like that?
Right,
Because you're curious, you want to learn. That person's probably heard it hundreds of times. So it's you forget that. And it's easy for them to say, okay, here we go again. I'm tired of explaining this.
right,
What bothers me the most about wokeness and political correctness is if you don't ask questions, if you don't talk openly, you don't learn. So you stay mired in that ignorance, and you don't grow, you don't learn because you're afraid of being labeled as a racist or a homophobe or ignorant or whatever it may be. And I think that's one of the worst things that can happen is
right,
that you can't continue to learn and grow because you're afraid to ask questions. If I ask a question and I start talking and someone says to me, you're a racist, and I say, well, explain that to me. And they do, and I go, wow, I didn't know that I was a racist. That's how I learn about it. So I don't make that mistake again. And as you mentioned, our buddy Jeffrey, our business reporter, he's taught me a lot about some of my stereotypes and my racial knowledge that I didn't even know I had, that I grew up with. And I'm thankful that I have him to ask questions and to run by him. And
right,
he's very patient. He's very good with it. But that's what scares me the most is this cancel culture and afraid to talk is we don't grow, we don't learn, and we continue to stay in that rut and we continue to be a racist, but we don't even know about it.
right. And part of it for me is like that is really trippy, and it makes it difficult for me to discuss, is that so many of the terms that I grew up with as being a positive thing have been commandeered and taken over and turned into a negative.
Yep.
That I hesitate to talk about it because I don't think that we're not using the same definitions for what something means. And just really briefly, I don't want to get into a whole big thing about it because it's something, frankly, that I think is a little bit ridiculous that it's blown up in our society this much, as far as there's legislation being, put forward about wokeness when we have many more urgent things to be concerned about.
Right.
But I just want to really quickly ask people to go and look in the dictionary at what woke means, because woke is defined, or not being woke is defined as not attentive or alert, having no feeling, numb, and it's used euphemistically to indicate that someone is dead, sleeping. So woke to me means none of those things. That's the opposite of, not being attentive or alert. It means being alert and being attentive. It means having feeling and not being numb. It means not being dead. It means learning. And a couple of things, I've known it, or I really learned it from my father when he was teaching me about Black American history. And, when I guess was maybe 11 or 12, 13, around that age, we would watch, PBS had a special every year, probably during Black History Month, I'm sure, called Eyes on the Prize. And it was a series about the civil rights movement in America and how it started. And, we learned about, or it talked about things like the Green Book, which I had never heard of before. And I hadn't heard about it in my American history studies, that Black people used to they had a book that told them that the safe places where they could stay if they were taking a road trip, they were going to visit family from the north to the south or the south to the north. The places that they could stay, where the sundown towns were. And if you don't know what those are, then you should look that up, because that was something that was very important for Black people, African Americans to know. That would be considered being woke, to know that information, to know that there were, because I thought if you were an American, it didn't matter what color your skin was, you could go wherever you wanted to in the country like anyone else, and take vacations and you didn't have to worry about being out after dark or, I mean, I didn't grow up during the civil rights movement. I grew up after. So I, from where I stood and living where I lived, I didn't really know about those issues, and they weren't taught in great detail. I mean, the civil rights movement might have had a chapter for everything that took place during that time. So, I do think that for some of us, being woke is a matter of life and death. And that's kind of what the definition is if you look at what being woke and the opposite of that, which is sleep. And, sleep is wonderful, but it leaves you open for danger.
Yes.
So, but I also, conversely, I do agree with you that I think that we've kind of gotten to a point of not wanting to hear the other side, wanting to shout down ideas that we don't agree with, and not even consider, I mean, if there are certain trigger words that we hear, then we kind of blow up and immediately label the other person and do the thing
Right.
we don't want to do. I mean, it seems to me that people that shout down those with differing perspectives are being intolerant, and what they most believe in or want society to do is to be more tolerant. But that is, I mean, that's a fine line, because I mean, we don't want to tolerate Nazism. We've seen what happens when you do. We don't want to tolerate white supremacy, because that can lead us down a really scary path, or any other forms of, one culture or group thinking that they're better than another, and thinking that they have the right to impose their viewpoints. At least not in America. That's not what this country was founded on, and hopefully we're not going backwards. We're moving forwards and progressing towards a more perfect union.
But that's how you grow and learn and develop and progress, is by having those conversations, difficult conversations, learning what you did wrong or what you did right, or why you were labeled. And what bothers me about wokeness, and first of all, I wish I had said this earlier, I'm leery and careful about what I'm saying right now. I'm fearful of saying something, and I'm, oh, but what a racist. I can't listen to that guy anymore. You're being called out for your free speech. But what bothers me is, for example, if someone calls me a racist, now that I've been put into a category, it's as if my whole identity is that I'm a racist, and how can I change that identity? But I can change my behavior. So there's a difference between me saying to myself, I'm an idiot when I make a mistake, versus that was a stupid thing that I did. And I can learn from doing a stupid thing and change my behavior in the future. But if I'm labeled, or I label myself as an idiot, how am I supposed to change that? And that's one of the things that bothers me. When you call me a racist, you don't tell me what I did wrong that was offensive, why it was offensive, and what do I do to change that behavior. And that's what happens when you get canceled, because you can't seek redemption or restitution or learn what you did is wrong. And I make mistakes. I'm an error. We all do. It's who Jesus said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Right.
Everybody makes those mistakes and so on. And it's important to be called out on them and explained why it's a mistake, why you shouldn't say that. And then you think about it and you decide about it yourself. But if we're fearful of talking about it, then no one talks about it. And I remain ignorant. I remain a racist, or I remained mired in this lack of knowledge about what I'm doing wrong.
Well, I do think, yes, I agree with you on that. And I will say, I think we all have there are trigger words. I like to use ignorant a lot. And to me, that's not a bad word. There are plenty of things that I'm ignorant about, that I've learned about, that I, seek education on. But it does seem that when I've said that to other people talking about institutional racism and trying to make points, and saying you're ignorant on this topic, they really take offense to that.
Yes.
But it's true, we are all ignorant, more than and also, to be honest, it's a lot longer than we have time to talk about in this podcast, but we all have inherent biases. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, doesn't matter what religion you have. And I did not know that. I didn't think that. I had a roommate when I did my secondary college at SUNY New Paltz, who was a teacher, and she was getting her master's, and we had a lot of talks about classes that she was taking, about all of us have biases and prejudices, things that we grew up with, that we were taught, and you have to unlearn those. But I think I agree with you. I think that, we have to treat others the way we want to be treated. And I don't know of any person in this world that is all knowledgeable of everything. We're all ignorant, and we all need to be patient with each other. But burying our heads in the sand and pretending that things didn't exist, or not wanting to deal with history because we're ashamed of the way our ancestors behaved, is not a way to go about it.
I agree with you.
Yeah, in my opinion. And I mean, I think, reporters and those in most newsrooms would agree. You're seeking the truth, and we want that to come out no matter what it is. We all want.
And I agree with you about the term ignorant. To me, ignorant means you just don't know something because you haven't been exposed to it, as opposed to being stupid. To me, stupid means you just don't have the mental capacity to learn things and to have a lot of common sense. And you hit it right on the head about our biases and prejudice. We learned them, and if you learn it, you can unlearn it and learn to not be biased and to not have those prejudices. But I can't unlearn that unless you tell me and explain to me why I'm biased or why I'm prejudiced and what I have to do to change it. And being afraid to talk about that, we don't get to the first step of me realizing, Jim, you're prejudiced or you're biased. That's what bothers me about cancel culture and wokeness. And damn, getting your feelings hurt, that's part of growing up, and that's a part of living, is getting your feelings hurt and learning how to deal with it.
Right.
And often when I talk to people, it isn't my intention to hurt their feelings, but it may hurt their feelings because I don't know their background and so on. I want them, and I appreciate when they say, "Hey, Jim, that hurt my feelings, and here's why."
Right.
And then I will apologize. When I get into arguments with my wife, that hurt my feelings. Well, I didn't mean for it to hurt your feelings. Well, it doesn't matter if you meant for it to or not. It did. But let's talk about it so I don't do that again in the future.
Right.
Yes, I mean, it drives me crazy that one of the things that democracy in America is known for is freedom of speech, and wokeness and political correctness is stymieing that.
Yes, I agree. It is frustrating, and it's I don't know. We're gonna have to figure out a way to get past that, to get over it, or else I don't know what's going to happen. Everyone's retreating more and more into themselves and into their own groups, and it's getting kind of frightening.
It is, and part of the big reason that they are retreating into themselves is the computer and smartphones. You don't talk to people face to face anymore. It's all done electronically. Right. I mean, I see that a lot when when I go out and I talk to young people who are in their 20s. I'll give you an example. Several times while I'm waiting in the checkout line, I'll try to start up a conversation with the cashier, and they look at me like, "Why are you talking to me? I don't know you." They're almost fearful and angry about it. I don't want to have a conversation with you. And that just doesn't really exist anymore, and that's tearing apart the fabric of society.
Yeah.
And now we got artificial intelligence. I mean, I'm very concerned and intrigued about where is that going to go and what is that going to do to us.
Yeah, I was going to say our time is just about up, and getting back to a little bit more about what this podcast is about. One of the things that I love about having conversations with you and our other friends from the newsroom is the different topics because it's so wide and varied. But we're going to get into maybe mushrooms and psychedelics and those being used now. I mean, they were illegal, um, and there were a whole bunch of myths about what happens to them, but now they're starting to be used, as a form of to help mental health. But just yeah, I love being in the newsroom and that culture and having that family, because we can talk about so many different things, and artificial intelligence and I just think I'm scared. I'm very frightened of that whole this coming wave of what they're being able to do.
But I think we'll adapt to it as we did with the Industrial Revolution, as we did with the computer coming. We'll adapt to it, and I think it's not going to be as bad as we think. I also try to look at all the positive aspects of it as well. So, and it's an exciting time to be alive, to see what is happening. So I always try to look at the silver lining. And before we go, I will say one thing to you that I'm not afraid to say, and that I really truly believe, and that is, I love you. I respect you. I am so blessed to have you as a friend.
Oh,
For all that you've taught me and all that you do for me, and I know I can count on you.
thank
And
you, Pipe Daddy.
sure, and wokeness and cancel culture, I think, builds walls between friendships, and that intimate trust and belief in somebody, and that's not ever good for society. I worry that this wokeism is going to start to represent McCarthyism, or some type of Orwellian future in which freedom of expression becomes severely restricted in the future. That's not good for anybody.
Well, I was going to say, I certainly feel the same way about you, as far as I consider you a very good friend. I love you. I know you have a great heart, and a great mind, though it's very, very weird. You surprised me, because I thought you were going to do that whole wind up to just tell me that you were the boss of me, and you are not. Um, but yeah, I think I'd like us to find another word other than wokeness. I mean, just in society in general, because I don't like that that's been commandeered. I think that that's very important, especially to Black culture. I think it's important for a lot of people to be woke. It's important for wives to be woke and make sure you know where your husbands are. And some women know what I'm talking about. Others, you need to get woke about that.
Mhm.
But I do understand what you're saying. I don't think we need to be so sensitive. I think we need to have grown-up conversations, and we need to have grown-up relationships, and understand that nobody is perfect. No one.
Right.
And
And it's okay to be sensitive, but
right.
also be sensitive to other people's opinions and values. And you say, I wish there was another word for it. And I think the word for it is awareness, self-awareness, and awareness about what other people think and what other people value, instead of imposing your values on them and saying you're wrong and I'm right. And I don't want to hear it anymore.
Right.
Just
But also, I think that it's good to be open, and for people to understand that the way that you look at something may not be the way that someone else looks at something, and to be respectful of that. And as
yes,
long as
yep.
everyone is respectful, just be respectful and be nice to each other in the way that we talk to one another. And then, we can get past most of the problems and the issues that we have. I think I still have that hope somewhat. But anyway, on that note, we are going to close this out before we get cut off. And I just want to take a moment to thank Pipe Daddy for joining me for this conversation. Thank you all for joining us for our second episode. And thank you to southerntierlife.com for hosting this podcast. We'll be back. And like I said, I'm not sure when, but I would like to invite some of our former newsroom colleagues on to join the conversation, and maybe even some that are still in the newsroom, so that they can tell us what reporting is like now. I think that
So I echo your remarks, and to be a very woke, I will also say this: if I had said those remarks, they would have been a lot better, a lot more concise, and people would enjoy them a lot more.
And on that note, folks, until next time, I love you,
Thanks.
Daddy.
Go on, folks.
Bye.